Hey everybody, that Montana guy bringing another video, and today we're going to talk about the shrub that's behind me. It's called the chokecherry. If this is something that you're interested in, stay tuned. Alright, so this is the chokecherry. I can see this one's pretty tall. This is what the berries look like. Okay. And the leaves. Okay, that's the top of them. That's the bottom. As you can tell, I can't really tell in the video, but these are pretty straight. Alright, so again, we're talking about the chokecherry. I do apologize for the background and if you hear the wind. I'm right here on the Yellowstone River. Right behind me we have the Sacrifice Cliffs, but I'll talk about that in a different video. I'm going to use my cheat sheet here. The reason why is because there's a lot of information regarding the chokecherry, and I don't want to give you guys misinformation or not tell you everything that I've learned about the chokecherry. And so I do apologize if you don't like people using these. With that in mind, we'll talk about the history first, then we'll talk about the uses, and we'll talk about medicinal, and there's going to be a warning at the end of the chokecherry video. So the chokecherry itself, it's actually a pretty incredible plant, shrub, whatever you want to call it. For one, it's poisonous, edible, and medicinal. Throughout this video I'll talk about all three of them, but for right now it's time for a history lesson, because I love history. If you've seen any of my other videos, I mean, come on, it's Montana. So anyways, we'll talk about the history of the chokecherry, and we'll go from there. So the Indian tribes of Montana ranked chokecherry as one of the most important berry plants that they used, along with serviceberry, buffalo berry, huckleberry, along with others. The chokecherry was considered the most important berry plant by the Cheyenne and other plains-dwelling Indians, or tribes, I'm sorry. The berries themselves were usually harvested in late August, early September, after the first freeze. It was told that it made the berries a lot sweeter. The tribes would sometimes eat the berries raw, but the majority they would sun dry and then store for winter. One of the things about the winters around here is they get kind of harsh sometimes, depending on where you're at in Montana. So when they got them ready for the winter, first they would pulverize them. They would place each chokecherry, pit and all, and put the pit in the back of your mind real quick, because there's a couple of other things in regards to the pit itself. And we'll talk about that later on, but just kind of put in the back of your mind about the pit. On a flat rock and smashed it with a stone pedestal. The finely ground berry material was then formed into round cakes, each of these measuring in several inches in diameter. And after they did that, they'd dry them in the sun. This formed one of the basic food staples in the early times. And what I mean by the early times, it was back before the Europeans explored this, started settling in this area. The chokecherry was used as a basic ingredient for pemmican. It was also added on various kinds of soups and stews, along with service berries and other fruits, various roots that were around in Montana, and some kind of meat, such as venison, elk, or bison. Back in the days of the Native American tribes going free, they had buffalo all over the place, from the Great Plains all the way in the Rockies. Unfortunately, nowadays they're most famously known to be over in Yellowstone Park or on private ranches, but they used to be all over the place. There used to be millions upon millions of them. That's for a different story. Also, the pioneers and explorers ate chokecherries, especially in times of hardship. A good example is the mountain man Hugh Glass. If you're not familiar with him, long story short, he was a mountain man that got mauled by a grizzly bear and survived. I'll do a video about that later on, but he was eating them after he got attacked. He was eating the chokecherries. Another important part of history, including the chokecherry, was members of the Lewis and Clark expedition ate them when other food resources became scarce. So that's actually kind of cool to know about with Lewis and Clark. If you're not familiar, Lewis and Clark expedition went from, I think it's St. Louis, the Pacific Ocean, and back. One of the states that they went through was Montana. In fact, Yellowstone, Missouri, to name a couple of the rivers they were in. But they went from back east, Pacific, and back east again. So, with that said, that's kind of the history involved with it. Another thing that was used with the shrubs themselves that was not medicinal or edible was that the Crow used the wood for teepee spikes, or I'm sorry, teepee stakes and pins. They also mixed the sap with neck portions of a certain animal and made it glue. The glue was useful for attaching feathers on arrow shafts. The same sap was also mixed with different colored clays to make permanent paints for Indian designs on suitcases, shields, and other items. The Cheyenne Indians used chokecherry limbs to make arrow shafts and bows. And one more thing too with the history of this is that due to the Crow being surrounded by enemy tribes in the early days here in Montana, they learned of several ways to conceal their presence. One of these ways of concealing their presence and not letting other, I guess, enemies know where they were located was they would make their daytime fires with the wood of chokecherry, a wood which they claimed makes no smoke. So that's pretty cool to know. With that said, the uses of the chokecherry, of course, you eat the berries, and I'll go into about the pit later on, so please bear with me. You can eat the cherries, or I'm sorry, the berries, but the berries can also be used to make wines, syrups, jams, jellies, and chokecherry butter. I've never heard chokecherry butter until now, so if you have a recipe for it, how to make it, I'd love to know about it in the comments down below. I think that'd be kind of interesting to learn how to do, because we have chokecherries all over the place here. So with that said, of using them, the chokecherry also had medicinal uses. The chokecherry itself has been used in folk medicine and it has been backed up by modern science. Most noteworthy of the medicinal virtues realized in this region, and region I mean by Montana, was its ability to relieve various kinds of stomach complaints such as diarrhea and dysentery. The Flathead, Kootenai, Gros Ventres, and Crow Indians, to name a few tribes, made a medicinal tea from chokecherry bark to bring about a cure. And I do apologize ahead of time if I butchered those names. If I did, please put in the comments down below how you actually pronounce them. So, the Flathead and Kootenays believed it would be one of the best of their remedies. The Cheyenne made a similar medicine from pulverized, unripened chokecherries for diarrhea. In fact, when the Lewis and Clark expedition camped on the upper Missouri River, Captain Meriwether Lewis became ill with abdominal cramps and a fever. He made a tea from the chokecherry twigs and was well the next day. The drug from the chokecherry bark was introduced in America and medicine around 1787 and appeared in the United States Pharmacopoeia about 1820. It was brought to the attention of the British Medical Society around 1863, and the Flathead used same medicinal tea with the bark for intestinal worms, and so did the early pioneers. The Crow Indians used the infusion of the bark for cleansing sores and burns, but only certain tribal members had the authority to perform the medicinal application. Not every single tribes person was able to go out and make this. There were certain individuals that had the authority to. The Flathead Indians also used the chokecherry as an eye medicine. They warmed the resin from the bark, strained it, and allowed it to cool before placing into sore eyes. So, that said, we'll talk about the tree itself. As you saw in the video at the beginning, it's a small tree or large shrub standing from 15 to 20 feet tall. I was standing kind of right next to it, and I'm 6'2", so that's pretty tall. The leaves themselves are brilliant green oval leaves that are about 1.5 to 4 inches long. Between May and June, it bears showy white blossoms at the end of the upper branches. And then during the summer, the flowers develop into purplish red fruit, each measuring almost a ½ inch in diameter. So, like I said earlier about the pit, it's the pit is the hard stone-like portion within the fleshy outer covering. And again, I'm going to tell you something else about the pit at the end of this video, so please bear with me. The shrub itself is usually found in moist soil, especially along creeks and ravines. But it also can be found in open wooded areas of valleys, foothills, and mountain slopes. In fact, the video I took at the beginning of this, I was right here next to the Yellowstone, just further up the river. It is one of the most widely distributed shrubs in North America, but especially common in northern Rockies and northern plains. So with all that said, again, like I said about the pit, certain portions of the chokecherry are poisonous. The leaves, especially the young succulent shoots, and the pits of the fruits contain a deadly cyanic acid. It's been reported that people have died from eating the pits. How much they've eaten or anything like that, I couldn't tell you. It's just been reported that they've died because of the pits. Losses to livestock from eating the leaves have occurred also. So it's kind of theorized, and I don't know this for 100% certainty, but it's been theorized that the reason why the early Native Americans were able to use the pit is because they sun-baked it or sun-dried it, and they pulverized it. And whether that has something to do with it, to making it not poisonous or not, I don't know. It's just what I've read, that they use the pit and all, and they seem to be just fine. Maybe it's an allergy, I couldn't tell you, to be honest. That's just me thinking. But that's everything I know so far about the chokecherry. If you know anything that I've forgot about, please put it in the description or put in the comments down below. I'd like to know more about it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like more videos like this, or Montana history, or outdoor activities, consider subscribing. Again, thank you all for watching. I do appreciate the views. And y'all stay safe and enjoy the woods. Montana Guy out.